Prologue. The chamber was a space of darkness. Within the solid gloom, a man sat upon a chair of dank ebon. Around his head shone a ring of golden light, like the gilded brilliance of a self-bestowed crown. The man with the gilded coronet smiled as the light bathed his face and filled his mind with visions of wonder and glory. For he was no ordinary man alone in the darkness. He was in fact the Time Lord known as the Master. And in a moment, through the ornately decorated circle which floated around his head, his mind would be anointed with the greatest tool at his disposal, the knowledge of the Matrix. The Matrix. What a concept it truly was. As his thoughts brushed its surface, the Master drew an anticipatory breath. How could he truly describe accessing the Matrix? It was the mental masterpiece of his home world of Gallifrey. And more than a brain storage system or the ultimate computer, the Matrix truly was the repository of all knowledge and the perfect machine. The Master briefly considered the many simpletons he had known and dispatched across creation's canvas. Many had been vain seekers of power, foolishly attempting to know and comprehend their purpose by seeking supposedly higher paths, religion, philosophy, even charity. The Master sneered at their wasted efforts, for only he had comprehended the infinite, the truth he had acquired through the Matrix. Here, within this vaulted pinnacle of Time Lord technology, all preconceived notions of reality were challenged, refuted, and discarded. Here, in this freedom from all supposed natural laws, the Matrix was the law unto itself, and he was the judge of all mentality. The Master considered with just a glare of disappointment.
If only I had been its first architect. It could have been so much more.
Then the Master's eyes widened as his mind heard the sound, a deep, throbbing drumbeat. The Matrix was ready. The Master steeled his consciousness for the journey, and then his thoughts turned the great key of destiny. There was a new sound, a metallic snapping, like all the doorways of eternity opening at once. The Matrix opens. The Master's mind revolves around it, twists about, dives into, crawls through, consumes within. The Master? Who is he? Why is he here? Why be alone? Why not merge into light? No. The light is great and brilliant. The darkness is deeper. Unseal the mind's eye. Become the event horizon. Focus the vision. Attract the light. Consume the light.
Contact.
A drop creates a ripple as it falls into the depths of the sea. The drop struggles to direct itself against the crushing pressure of the surroundings, the rising tide of time's fulfilling revolutions. The drop finds its bearings, buoys itself upwards, bubbles itself outwards, bursts, and breaks forth from the surface of the sea with the force of a tidal wave. The Master rises up from the depths of ignorance and lifts himself up to the height of prophecy. He arrives successfully. Time to think normally now. The Master looked around and continued to feel disappointed. There, only a void of darkness around his mind. All of the infinite at his disposal, and it could only present itself in such a predictable manner. No matter, there would be time for creativity shortly. The Master stepped forward and for a brief moment felt an acute disorientation. He had wandered down the Matrix's neural pathways before, but on this occasion he had the rare delight of entering its realm physically as well. With the Time Lord's nigh impenetrable grasp of security, a personal intrusion into the Matrix was usually tantamount to self-imprisonment, but on this unique occasion, the Master was authorized to intrude.
Authorized.
The Master bristled at the preconditions permitting his presence in the Matrix, but he brushed aside his displeasure. He had an abundance of interesting work to accomplish first. He strode into the darkness, savoring the endless freedom of mobility. Full mobility was one of the many boons he had endeavored to restore unto himself since that fateful clash with the Doctor at Tercerus so many eons ago. The Master remembered that barren world ignite with light and fire, the hated faces of the Doctor, Sarah Jane Smith, Lethbridge Stewart, and the whelp watching his agony.
Enough!
The master retracted his mind into his present. Despite the limitations of his current, stolen, Traconite hybrid exterior, he was whole again, for a little while at least. But now he possessed different purposes in traversing the Matrix, although, as was so often the case in his lives, the path which he now followed led only to one source, the Doctor. And finally, he would mark the end of the Doctor's road. The master glanced at the dust bowl beneath his feet and saw a number of insects glowing in the darkness. 2 of them were locked in fierce combat.
How often have the Doctor and I grappled against each other?
He realized as he watched the insects struggle.
But not long enough.
The master raised his heel and crushed the insects into the earth. At that very moment, a bright light flared before the master's face, and he saw an orb awash in white, gold, and green flames suspended directly before him. He halted in his tracks and reminded himself that the Matrix was a place where private thoughts were always in the public eye. The light from the orb spoke to him.
Are you lost already, Master?
I do not require directions,
the master replied. His eyes bored into the orb's ardent brilliance.
Nor my intelligence insulted.
Despite his disapproval, the orb's flames scintillated outward, isolating the master's mind from the Matrix gestalt. The psychic inferno began to boil away the surface of his memory. Within the fumy haze of his mind's view, he heard the light mock of the voice say,
"Just so you remember precisely why you're here."
The smoke gathered thick and resolved itself into the image of a paranoid face.
Coordinator Vansel of the CIA. How inventive of you to visit me in my TARDIS. Unfortunately for you, I do not welcome visitors here, even when they are the most unmemorable of guests.
Vansel placed his hands behind his back to cover their clenching before he replied.
Before you exercise your property rights on me, I have something of great importance which even you must value. The Doctor. Ah, I see that I have touched the right nerve. Good. You may lower your weapon now.
The master approached his former acquaintance and lowered his TCE to hover directly before Vansel's eyes.
Of course,
the master replied with suave, agreeable tones. The natural pallor of Vansel's face almost glowed in the shadows of the master's TARDIS. He knew he must proceed with care.
Now, in the interest of cooperation, I will be brief. The Doctor has embarrassed the High Council with his interfering for the final time. And as punishment for his behavior, it has been decided that he must, once again, face the justice of the Time Lords.
The master's smile hardened.
Since the Doctor has enjoyed his greatest successes in making a spectacle of so-called Time Lord justice, I can't imagine how you presume you shall inflict your punishment.
This time will be the last. As co-coordinator and special representative of the Celestial Intervention Agency, I have come to inform you that Lord President Nearok has appointed you to the position of prosecutor in the Doctor's forthcoming trial. Upon accepting this honorable opportunity, you will be authorized to use any information pertaining to the Doctor at your disposal, including full and complete access to the resources of the Matrix itself. There, I have done my duty, and I may say I miss the pleasure in doing so. Nonetheless, the offer stands. Will you accept it or not?
The master stood rooted before Vansel, his eyes wide and his breathing perfectly pressurized.
So, the Doctor is once again unbalancing the scales of Time Lord justice. And the Lord President, or should I refer to him as your puppet, wishes me to tip him over permanently?
At the master's inference, Vansel's hidden hands clenched tighter.
The Celestial Intervention Agency obeys the will of the President of the Time Lords at all times. We value loyalty as a guiding principle.
Vansel countered.
Yes, just as both the CIA and its Lord President are subject to the whims of the Doctor.
The master retorted with sardonic relish.
And now, your Lord President so wishes to escape the Doctor's authority that he has committed the obvious offense in soliciting my authority. How desperate he must be.
The master chuckled, his dark eyes narrowing in grim amusement before continuing.
As well he should be. Against the Time Lords alone, the Doctor can succeed in confusing your crippled system long enough to survive. Or, especially given the quality of its current representative, escape with no harm done to him. No, there is no victory the Time Lords could offer me. I could destroy the Doctor on any occasion. However, it is an impossibility come true that unlimited access within the Matrix is an acceptable part of your CIA's bargain, one that even I can scarcely overlook. And what new secrets may I discover to help finally humiliate and destroy the Doctor?
It was enough.
Very well. I accept the position.
We felt that you would, though I will say that you've exceeded my expectations,
said Wenzel with a sneer, his tolerable reserves of confidence replenished.
Now, if you will put away your defenses, we can discuss the time and place of your searching the Matrix to prepare your case.
The TCE did not waver. The Master chuckled, his eyes narrowing in amusement.
No, that is not agreeable. I already am perfectly capable of using your resources. Therefore, this conversation is no longer necessary.
A repulsive sneer stretched along the Master's mouth.
As for you, my transparent friend, be assured that although I can tuck you away at any moment...
The Master reached behind himself and deftly danced his fingers across the switches of a console panel.
I authorize the CIA to do that in my stead.
Before Wenzel could protest, he disappeared from the chamber. The Master smiled. Suddenly, he started blinking rapidly, as if he had just awoken from a dream. The Master's face constricted with rage.
Wenzel!
He snarled. The Master snapped his fingers, and the said coordinator reappeared in the console room, looking like an intruder caught in the light of his own guilt. The Master advanced towards him.
You assume to hypnotize me while I wield the power of the Matrix? You deny who I am?
The Master's hands ignited with brilliant flames as they covered Wenzel's face. And then he was alone again, only the Master. A cold wind softly rustled through the darkness. The Master breathed satisfaction. As he well knew, Wenzel's trust in him was far from full and complete, but that was always an advantage to knowing as many competing conspirators as possible.
Even so, with such a multitude of unworthy assistants in the cosmos at my command, it would have been such an easy pleasure to kill him,
he thought to himself.
But some pleasures must wait for their proper time and circumstances. And thinking of favorable conditions, as much as I enjoy the darkness, even I need a lamp for my feet.
The Master glanced down upon the squashed carcasses of the insects he had trampled moments before. Pools of bioluminescent juices oozed and congealed around the broken and drained tiny bodies. The Master extended his hands towards the spilled fluids and with the push of a thought summoned the soupy, yellow glow towards him. The gleaming liquid detached from the ground with a harsh sizzling of air and matter. The bright sublimation swirled and twisted before the Master's face, before igniting into a brilliant golden miniature vortex suspended in the air, a perfect portable hands-free torch. Pleased with his creation, the Master stepped forward. His vortex torch hovered at his side, following his every movement as he continued to explore the darkness. Except it was not just darkness anymore. He halted and raised his eyes. For one of the few times in memory, even he could only gaze around in amazement. The creativity of the Matrix had demonstrated itself more capably than he had expected. He was in the midst of an infinite forest. The surrounding array of trees stretched themselves high into the inky ether. Their trunks were so high that they seemed to stretch into each other. Each tree possessed many branches, and the branches were so numerous and thick with foliage that the sky itself was a composition of dark leaves. Yet for all this detail, the Master could only just perceive the barest outlines of this forest. The almost impenetrable darkness of the mindscape still clung to every surface, muffling each outline with an almost fuzzy glow. Nevertheless, even in the shadows he could perceive an intriguing feature of the trees around him. Carved deep into the bark of each trunk were marks of a curious design. The Master recognized the symbols.
Old High Gallifreyan, the ancient language of the Time Lords.
The master sprinted over to the nearest trunk and pressed his fingers against one of the symbols nearest to the ground. The grooves of the carving appeared to have been scorched into the trunk, and there was a deep red color sealed within the shapes. The surface of red seal glistened in the darkness. The master peered closer and witnessed the red material pulsing in soft rhythmic vibrations. There was no mistaking the nature of the substance. It was blood, rich and flowing. He extended his fingers and reached within the symbol to touch the crimson layer. He was convulsing, his body pulsing in pair with the symbolic rhythms. For a moment, the master felt as if his fingers were stretching into the tree itself, like a parasitic fungi attempting to bond with an unsuspecting host. It was an exhilarating sensation. Then the blood bubbled outwards and began to flow upwards along his arms. His mind was caught in the path of the flood, overflowing with images of another life. A life fueled with ambition and driven to climb the rungs of the social structure while accepting an enticing assignment and lured into scenes of peace and backgrounds of war, between whirlwinds of life and parties and schemes that replace ambition with understanding. Just as a bullet pierces both hearts and sight closes forever upon the face of the doctor. The master opened his eyes. He remembered this doctor, the confounded comedian, the one who had disrupted his plan for the war games. That doctor's interference had eventually cost the master an earlier body during the fallout with the aliens, and one he had particularly enjoyed. The searing remembrance of earlier lives had cut short the bloody vision. The crimson flow retreated back into the symbol carved into the tree bark. The master retreated a step and steadied himself. A name, Serena, whispered about the surface of his mind, like a lone leaf tossed about in a storm.
So I have seen the wasted existence of yet another traveling companion of the Doctor? Foolishly duped into believing that his life is worth following. Such a deadly misconception.
The master contemplated the nature of the vision and the potential insight it gave him into the Matrix's current dramatic persona. As he theorized, he noticed his feet among the dark, tangled roots of the trees. He then realized why he had not seen the trees within the darkness before. They were the darkness. Each tree and root and branch and leaf was composed of the densest black material he had ever discovered. The master considered his options and crouched close to the root system.
Well,
he thought,
to assert my rightful dominion, perhaps I need to wrought a little creative destruction upon the land.
He then gripped the largest root nearest him and ripped it loose from the ground. The root cracked and tore open. A geyser of blood burst from the wound. There was a high-pitched, almost feminine wail, and as the master stared with rapt satisfaction, the crimson liquid which had so nearly overcome him flowed freely from the broken tree vein. Within the colored stream, the master could see the same images which the vision had contained, and many more personal scenes flooding about his feet, enough for an entire household of lifetimes. After several moments, the gushing subsided, and the tree, drained of its fluids, collapsed within itself and sank into the soaked mire. Fascinated, the master knelt down and, figuring a sample of the red liquid, raised it close to his eyes. It was then he realized that the liquid was more than just blood. It was pure biological matter, within which had coursed the entire lifeline of a Gallifreyan family. And he, the master, stood in center of it all. For an instant, the master was caught up in the awesome concept of himself, the true stem from which branched off all the infinite and intricate root systems of the entire biohistory of the Time Lords. But there would be time yet to sing his praises. Extracting himself from the Matrix's fertile soil, the master began to ponder the significance of his surroundings. As the Matrix was a psychic generator capable of infinite self-expression, therefore the landscape around him must have represented the entire webwork of the Time Lord mentality.
Assuming this is a model,
the master processed,
the trees must represent the various houses of our race, with the roots symbolizing some kind of genetic relationship between the various Time Lord lineages. The branches and leaves must therefore also stand for every individual Time Lord that has ever lived. Such a family history. And the Doctor's particular family house is...
The Master began to search for the correct markings on the tree trunks. As he searched, the Master discovered that although all the trees shared the same dark coloring, each one was represented by a different species. Some trees were regal in shape and stature, recalling that household's high birth and ranking, while others were cast in more modest and unassuming molds, as if to convey their less distinguished yet passably respectable histories. Others lay askew with broken trunks and rotted branches. Some patches of ground were completely barren, without any signs of having ever upheld a household. Yet in such places the Master could feel the imprint of life in the shadow of a premature pruning, a death unnatural. This was a common enough lot in Time Lord lives. Undisturbed, the Master scavenged further. Eventually, he saw it standing before him, though he was almost certain it only just now appeared. It was the Doctor's tree. The curious thing was that it was just the Doctor's tree. There was no family there, only the simple markings on the small spindled bark, which bore two symbols, the Earth Greek letters Theta and Sigma.
So,
the Master surmised,
the Doctor has cast himself off from his ancestral home in all ways. How thorough of him.
An equally singular, if not unexpected aspect of the structure was that, in stark contrast to its dusky peers, this tree was pure white with a smooth, translucent bark.
Typical of the Doctor,
the Master grimaced.
Always obsessing with the need to be obviously grandiose.
Glancing downward, the Master also discovered an even more striking feature of his old foe's matrix abode, its solitude. No roots connected the giant sprout to its neighbors, as there were none even nearby, and no leaves fanned out from the bare branches. Even here, in the Matrix, the Doctor was alone, a man apart from the rest. Once again, the Master softly marveled at how similar he and the Doctor really were. Drawing on experience over confidence, the Master stealthily crept towards the Doctor's impersonal representative, taking care not to forget how creative the Matrix could be in copying the Doctor's own cleverness. Eventually, the Master reached the tree and softly touched the trunk. Nothing happened. The Master shook his head and softly chuckled, the place where the Doctor's secrets were most visible, and there was no defense. With smug disapproval of his old foe's negligence, the Master began to examine the two symbols carved into the bark, scavenging for the same flow of information as this tree's more anemic companions had offered. Nevertheless, the Doctor's tree offered as many secrets as it did defenses. Its carved symbols were merely dark shadows of the Doctor's history, and yet deep within the shadows. The Master leaned up and into the tree and peered through the center dividing line of the bark's theta mark. Through the carving, the Master felt the gentle wafting of a cool breeze. The tree was hollow. Of course, there was no lifeblood to withdraw, but there was a sparkle of light. The Master pushed back from the trunk. There was something inside the empty husk. He knew it. With growing excitement at the chance of tapping into new knowledge, the Master began to circle the tree with quick, precise steps, searching for any weakness or entrance into the structure. He found the latter almost immediately, in the form of a simple, man-sized roundel. However, the Master was certain that such a prominent feature had not been visible a moment before. No surprise there. Steeling himself, the Master focused his will and pushed against the rounded entrance. Once again, the tree offered no resistance, and the surface of the roundel dissolved into the ether. The Master held himself back. This way was too easy. Thankfully, even in his Matrix form, he had come with protection. From within his velvet jacket, he pulled out a perfect replica of the TCE. He fired several beams of the potent energy, amplified here in the Matrix's unreality, into the dark, empty space within the white tree. There was neither a positive nor a negative response. His paranoia sated, the Master straightened himself and made to enter. At the precise moment, the vortex torch disappeared. The Master halted. He had not broken his mental concentration, nor had his attention wavered. The light had simply ceased to be. For an instant, he felt a deep unease, as if what he was about to do was a mistake, and one that would cause him untold consequences. As always, he buried all doubts in the bottomless depths of his hearts, and then he crossed the boundary. All was silent, absolutely silent. There was no temperature, simply an empty pressure about the void. The master could sense nothing in the space. Nothing of the doctor was there. His frustration mounting, the master circled around, searching for any structure or object. Even a patronizing note from the doctor was preferable to being made the fool. Then, without noticing when he first saw it, the master was watching the light. It was the same light he had seen through the theta mark, but just as outside, he could not see immediately the light's source. He stood still and studied the illumination. It was a small, dim sparkle at first, but it was quickly increasing in intensity. And sound. There were many indistinct sounds now echoing in the chamber. Almost by instinct, the master stepped forward to hear them more clearly and almost collided with another body. Snapping back, the master stood with his TCA at the ready and took advantage of the growing light to identify his opponent, who stood with equal hostility. In the rising light, the master saw himself through a dark glass. He was standing in front of a full-length mirror. After a moment of incredulity, the master lowered his weapon, cursing himself inwardly for his gullible moment. The light was bright enough now that the master could see the mirror in complete detail, and he approached it for a full examination. The mirror had no frame, but hovered motionless by itself in the air. It held itself within a simple circular shape, several feet in diameter, and yet almost without depth. It was a ghostly, unreal object, almost as if it belonged elsewhere, or else when. Heightening this touch of the immaterial was the mirror's surface, a material so bright and slickly smooth that even the master's eyes almost slid away from its surface. Notwithstanding this visual difficulty, he fixed on the surface of the mirror, which was now blazing with light. The master realized that it was the mirror itself that was the source of the light within the tree, but what had ignited its brilliance, his intrusion perhaps? The most important unanswered question was if the mirror also served as the source of the cacophony of sound which now cascaded into the master's ears, and a single voice drowned out all the rest. The doctor. Defying the hateful voice, the master focused his senses towards the mirror and penetrated its light. The master falls into the currents of the mirror's life, and through it he sees and hears the doctor, but not at that moment. He sees the memories long washed away by old time's currents. And what memories they are. The master sees the doctor when he was first formed. The master sees himself, just as new. Even now, they meet in time and time again. They are on Gallifrey, the children of the current age, the pride of the Time Lord nobility. Other faces rush about him, too fast for anyone short of a Time Lord to recognize. Many faces are friends then, most are foes now, for both of them. Some faces are foes even then, foes that taunt and attack. They are at a riverbank. One foe is with them. There is one in the water. There is one in the fire. Enough! The master broke away his gaze from the mirror. The past held no terrors for him, but there was nothing that lay buried there that would help him build his theatrical prosecution against the doctor in the present. Even so, this mirror, which apparently was the Matrix's direct link rooted into the doctor's personal history, was a deliciously valuable resource.
Perhaps,
whispered the master with eager anticipation.
I can plot my own way through the course of events.
With this determination in mind, the master's mind dove again into the rushing motion of the doctor's lifetime. The speed is intense. It leaves after images of time known. The master slices through all the familiar friends and terrors of the doctor's experiences. There are so many. How can the Matrix count and order them and have room for anyone else? Some images repeat themselves thanks to the emotions attached to them. An English junkyard, the Daleks, the Vord, the Cybermen, the Yeti, the Ice Warriors, the Sontarans, the Brigadier, the Earth, and the Master, with face upon face. The doctor also uncovers his own faces underneath the rush. One old, one shabby, one dashing, one eccentric, one open, and one proud to live. This is the doctor that lives now. The Master rides upon the wave of this doctor's memories, sights filled with violence and danger. A barren world ravaged by the gastropods, time-displaced Cybermen lurking in the underground, Autons poised within a gigantic reef station in the 101st century. The Ronnies mark specimens in industrial England, Androgams and Sontarans allied against two doctors, the Bora dropping through the time lash, a talking pig with a voracious appetite, different factions of Daleks fighting against themselves over Davros, the creator, a fairground hiding the loneliness of the Crystal Guardian himself, the celestial toymaker, and his astonishing imprisonment, the dwarf Mordant and his devastating hate ray machine, ice warriors on the world Magnus, along with the repugnant mentor Syl and the second-rate Time Lord emissary Anzor, all vying for control on Magnus, more Autons in 20th century Singapore, led once again by their master. The specter of Vistine Crane, preserved as a murderous sound, a purported original syllable corrupting the language of an entire population, a time-traveling cyber leader wreaking havoc upon Miss Brown's family, the Grand Palace of the Red Sun on Selvan, more Sontarans warring against their ancestor Kavich upon the Earth, the gravity-wielding tractators unleashed upon the Earth by their leader, Professor Stream, who was none other than the Master himself. All of these events and many more culminate upon the current day as the proud Doctor strides cheerily upon a dead, silent world. At his side steps the insufferable Miss Brown, with her hair somewhat longer and curled in a vain attempt to appear more attractive. The traveling companions speak of their curiosity for this particular planet, and the Doctor announces the name of the world: Ravalox. Ravalox. The wave crashes over. The Master retracted his mind's eye partially from beneath the mirror's surface, somewhat overwhelmed by the sheer freedom of information he had received and the knowledge it provided. So, the Doctor was investigating the history of Ravalox. Indeed, the Time Lords now had sound reason to compound their ancient disdain towards the Doctor with new fear, for what he would do once he discovered that world's familiar secret. The irony of the Doctor's current situation could not escape the Master, for he had wanted to claim Ravalox's secrets for himself, but with the Doctor involved he had far less hope for the success of Glitz and Dimmer's mission now.
And yet,
the Master realized,
if Gallifrey wanted the Doctor sentenced for interfering on Ravalox, then he would possess its secrets, eventually.
The Master stroked his beard. Never before had he felt so completely satisfied with himself. At long last, he had discovered the means to finally humiliate and crush the Doctor once and for all. Of course, this tool was still quite a blunt instrument, but in time the Master would sharpen its capabilities, and there were so many other secrets still to uproot. A sharp sound sliced deep into the Master's ears. His eyes widened and he looked closely towards the mirror. A thin, hairline crack now curved across its center. Could this be some sort of trap? He thought to himself. With stiff defiance towards any opposition, the Master stepped close to the glass surface and studied the crack. Somehow, although so thin, he could almost see something behind the structure. For the first time, the Master felt a pang of uncertainty as he knelt down and pressed his eyes against the crack to get a better view. There was something beyond the mirror. Something was moving. Suddenly, the Master saw the Doctor again, but he was not alone. There was another face. It was Contact. The Master screams in ripping agony as the mirror shatters and light bursts upon his eyes. He falls into the oncoming brightness and sees new sights, new sounds. He sees the Doctor as he is, and as he will be. He sees